The machine gun. Its groundbreaking design changed warfare.
When they first started using it, they just didn't understand how devastating the weapon was.
A dominating force of intimidation on the battlefield.
If there was a firefight and a helicopter came in with miniguns, there was pretty much nowhere you could hide.
In an age of high-tech weapons and ballistic missiles, the machine gun dominates the combat zone.
Machine guns are still the most relevant weapon on the battlefield today.
In this episode of Top Tens, we're looking at the top 10 machine guns that took the battlefield by storm and changed warfare forever. When we say machine gun, we're not talking about submachine guns or assault rifles like the Tommy gun or AK-47. To be considered for this list, each weapon must meet the strict definition of a machine gun. They must shoot rifle rounds, be capable of continuous ammo feed, have a system of barrel cooling or replacement, and employ a bipod or other support. We're hitting the Mustang gun range just outside Reno, Nevada, to put 10 machine guns to the test with a team of weapons experts.
This is a very devastating weapon. It's very big, it's very intimidating.
And while we're at it, have a little fun. In 1943, the Soviets pushed back the Germans with a gun that is number 10 on our list, the SG-43. It fires a 7.62 by 54 millimeter cartridge at 500 to 700 rounds per minute and has a range of 1,200 yards. In the summer of 1941, the Russian army was near collapse. Their infantry was desperate for a new weapon. We interviewed John Gresham, military historian and primary researcher on Tom Clancy's series of nonfiction military books.
The Germans are coming at them with MG-42s and other heavy weapons. So it makes sense that any new machine gun that the Red Army got was going to be an improvement.
A Russian team set out to develop a new machine gun, and in 1943, they created the System Gorshinov, or SG-43. Curtis DeBoard is an experienced gun manufacturer and owner of U.S. Ordnance in McCarran, Nevada.
The SG-43 is like the Cadillac of guns, a masterpiece of workmanship.
The Russians added a wheeled mount to improve the gun's mobility. Quay Terry is a weapons expert and gunnery sergeant for the U.S. Marine Corps.
With a team of 3 or 4 people, it really makes it easy to move this gun around. This mount provided the SG-43 with quite an arc of fire. It can easily be traversed quite widely, and it could also be elevated up and down.
The Soviets made it easier to pull the bolt back by placing the cocking handle, also known as the charging handle, under the gun.
The advantage of placing the charging handle down here was that the soldier no longer had to change his shooting position and thus lose his aim, where you would on other machine guns. He could just reach down, pull it out, return it, and it's ready to fire.
A new feature of the SG-43 was its feed claw. This made loading the weapon a simple process and resulted in fewer feed jams. Though it proved its worth on the battlefield, the SG-43 had its drawbacks.
It was very expensive to make, and the parts interchangeability was not good.
The tough and functional SG-43 arrived just in time for the Soviet Army in World War II.
This weapon became the anchor point for the trench lines of the defensive position around Kursk in the summer of 1943 that would throw back the German army and would begin the long Soviet offensive to Berlin and the end of World War II.
After World War II, modernized versions for tanks and for armored cars were introduced and exported to China and Vietnam.
So just from the standpoint of longevity, durability, and service, you have to include this on our list.
Number 9 on our list has played a crucial role in battles for the United States Army since its introduction in the 1980s. The M249 SAW.
It first really saw combat, I believe, in Desert Storm. It was vitally important during the operations the Rangers ran in Mogadishu in 1993 and has been very, very actively used in both Iraq and in Afghanistan.
The M249 squad automatic weapon, also called the M249 SAW, can fire 750 to 1,000 rounds per minute and uses the 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO cartridge. It has an effective range of 1,094 yards. The M249 is compact and maneuverable. The perfect choice weapon for close combat situations.
It's also relatively light in weight. It's not that much heavier than an M16. And you usually hang a box off of it, so you've got a large volume of ammunition at the ready.
The modern battlefield is often a dense urban area. A soldier cannot afford to be weighed down by a heavy gun. The M249's lighter design comes from a combination of metal and plastics. Dan Fassler is a former Marine and the Director of Operations at U.S. Ordnance.
You have a lighter weight weapon, so you're able to carry more ammunition, so you can deploy more ammo and rounds down range for suppressive fire. The lightweight actually allows you to hold on to it stronger. You can maneuver more, and then it keeps it more accurate because it doesn't have as much recoil as a normal weapon.
The U.S. Army has streamlined ammunition needs by having the M249 use a 5.56 millimeter cartridge, the same cartridge used by the M16 family of guns.
Everybody can fire the same 5.56 round. This is a major simplification of logistics, and if you are in an army the size of the U.S. Army, that's a big deal.
The ease of replacing ammunition in battle is one of the keys to making this machine gun a game changer.
The SAW was most effective in closer engagements. It had a very devastating effect if a person was hit with that round at that range.
The open bolt design allows air to come through and cool the barrel.
If you had a regular weapon, the bolt was closed, there was ammo in there, you shot a bunch of ammo, you'd have a possibility if the chamber got so hot, the ammunition would actually shoot on its own. So that's why most machine guns, they make open bolt. The M249 is easy to load. Just pull open the top cover, lay the belt in, close the cover down, cock the weapon back, and you're ready to shoot.
In a firefight, a gun barrel can get red hot, which could cause a malfunction or permanent damage to the weapon. That's why the M249 was designed with a quick change barrel, so soldiers can quickly swap the hot barrel for a new one.
To have the ability to change that barrel in a firefight and stay in the fight, it's very important.
At number 9, the M249 SAW, a modern machine gun perfectly suited for the urban combat zone. To make our top 10, a gun needs to blow away the competition. And that's why the Mark 19 grenade launcher lands at number 8. It's almost like every other machine gun. But instead of shooting bullets, the Mark 19 fires hundreds of grenades per minute. It's the only weapon to bridge the gap between a mortar and a hand-thrown grenade. The real power of the Mark 19 is its ammunition. The Mark 19 fires 40mm grenades at a rate of 325 to 375 per minute. It has an effective range of 1,640 yards. Each shell can be packed with a variety of explosives.
This is a very devastating weapon. It's very big, it's very intimidating.
The Mark 19 first saw action in the Vietnam War. It's the result of a long development process by the U.S. military to produce a universal grenade launcher that all the armed services could use.
In particular, they wanted something that could sit on ground mounts, vehicles, even aircraft and ships if necessary. And it has proven to be a very, very effective weapon.
The 40mm grenade is capable of killing anyone within a radius of 16 feet and wounding them within a radius of 49 feet.
It launches a lot of grenades downrange very accurately. It was so effective in the Gulf War that it really took off.
The Mark 19 is easy to load. Lay the ammunition in a feed tray. Go ahead, close the top cover. You cock once to get the round down on the face of the bolt, and then you cock a second time to actually load the round into the chamber of the barrel.
Because of its explosive power, the 40mm round will not arm itself until after it's shot. This protects the soldier firing the weapon.
You can actually see the round go out. It goes out 50 meters. It starts arming, self-arming, so that you'll get a range of where you can impact. Once it impacts either a vehicle, the ground, or any other object, it'll explode out.
The weapon is also well suited for gunners familiar with the M2 50 caliber machine gun.
One of the really nice features about the Mark 19 is that existing 50 caliber gunners can very easily transition over to this. And that's a real advantage when you're trying to train up and get people ready to go ahead and use not just this, but both weapons.
Both guns share similar handles. The trigger is almost identical, and the sight is very easy to use.
Obviously, there are some differences. You wind up lobbing the grenades more than you go and actually aim them. But once you've coached them onto target, it's a really devastating area weapon and can do a lot of good things for you that a 50 or other machine gun cannot do. Today, the most useful round is something called HEDP, or High Explosive Dual Purpose. It actually contains a small shaped charge in here, which in addition to having fragmentation and incendiary qualities, can actually cut through armor of vehicles like APCs and armored cars.
It's very destructive against vehicles, very destructive against buildings, and really destructive against personnel.
It can blast through armored vehicles, block walls, just about anything. There's not much that can protect you from that.
The Mark 19 is frequently mounted on vehicles. The powerful punch of the 40mm grenade allows soldiers to blanket an area under attack.
In an ambush, you aren't sure where people are shooting from. So what you do is you'll go ahead and right away you can just start lobbing rounds. If the fragments don't get them, the explosion can put them into shock. They won't be thinking straight. Then you can go in and take care of your business.
But the Mark 19's 40mm grenade can't be fired directly at a location. The heavy weight of the round requires it to be lobbed to its target.
This is a disadvantage because the enemy knows that when that's shot, if it's getting shot at him, he actually has a fraction of time to move out of the way.
The Mark 19 has also been adopted by the Israeli Defense Forces, Sweden, Taiwan, and is currently used by the Mexican Army battling drug cartels.
This has become an absolutely outstanding weapon that really delivers a unique set of characteristics to troops and sailors, Marines, and airmen in the field.
Unlike most automatic rifles, true machine guns use a quick-change barrel to keep a soldier in the fight. We're at the Mustang Gun Range, just outside of Reno, Nevada, to count down the top 10 machine guns that changed the game on the battlefield. Number 7 on our list is a general-purpose weapon that provides a heavy volume of close and continuous fire, the M60. It uses the 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO cartridge and can shoot up to 550 rounds per minute. It has an effective range of 1,200 yards. In 1945, the U.S. military wanted to develop a lighter machine gun. Their inspiration came from an unlikely source, the German Army.
They took a lot of the designs from the MG-34 and MG-42 from World War II. So they came up with the M60 machine gun, which came in at about 23 pounds.
Using high-strength sheet metals that could be heat-treated and rubber-coated, designers were able to take the weight off the handguard, feed cover, buttstock, and pistol grip.
This gun was made in small pieces and riveted together inside of a sheet metal channel. It was relatively inexpensive to make and quick to make.
In the Vietnam War, the iconic M60 rose to prominence as one of the main weapons of the infantry.
If they were ambushed, they could immediately drop to the ground, deploy the bipod, and be in the fight. They could maneuver the gun around easily. They could fire it from the shoulder if need be.
It's this kind of versatility that makes the M60 a top 10.
It was designed to be a universal weapon, a weapon which would fire a common ammunition and would be a common defense weapon within NATO and our allies.
In the 1960s, the Soviet Union needed a new machine gun to update their arsenal. Their answer is number 6 on our top 10 machine guns, the PKM. The PKM fires a 7.62 by 54 millimeter cartridge at 650 to 850 rounds per minute with an effective range of up to 1,640 yards. After World War II, the Soviets turned to Mikhail Kalashnikov, designer of the famed AK-47, to develop a light, powerful machine gun. He used a stamping process to make the gun less expensive to build.
PKM is, for the most part, a stamped gun. It's just a piece of flat steel that's cut out, and then a machine stamps it, and then they just assemble the parts on it, and it's ready to go.
The major stamped components of the PKM are the receiver, the feed cover, and feed mechanisms. The PKM fires from an open bolt, which allows air to cool the barrel. But the Russians soon discovered that an open bolt can have unintended consequences for soldiers on the battlefield.
A lot of dirt, grime, filth, mud, muck can be drawn into the barrel or into the bolt and pushed into the barrel, and therefore creating malfunctions at the most inopportune times, of course.
Even with the open bolt design, soldiers frequently needed to change the heated barrel. The Soviet military devised a plan that incorporated a quick change barrel.
You move this wedge to the left, and you grab the handle and you pull the barrel right out.
The PKM gave the Soviet and Eastern Bloc countries a lighter and more reliable weapon.
They could depend on this in any weather condition, in any climate, any place in the world. This weapon would always work for them. And when your gun works, you're a happy man.
The PKM may have made the Soviets happy, but it's our next gun that will blow you away. Look at it rip. This gun didn't just make the top 10. It blasted its way into number 5 by unloading a reign of terror, the M134 minigun. Don't let the name fool you. There's nothing mini about this monster. Its shoots the 7.62 NATO cartridge. Lots of them. 3,000 to 4,000 rounds per minute, with an effective range of 1,094 yards. The M134 minigun is an evolutionary development of the Civil War era. It traces its design back to the original Gatling gun, developed by Dr. Richard Gatling in 1861. 100 years later, the weapons branch of General Electric began designing an externally powered Gatling-type machine gun to be mounted on gunship aircraft.
One of the earliest applications for the minigun was using an old C-47 cargo airplane from World War II. The Air Force mounted a number of them out the side and created the very first gunship, known as Puff the Magic Dragon.
In the 1960s, the Vietnam War was raging. U.S. forces relied on helicopters to get soldiers and equipment in and out of dangerous landing zones. The minigun changed the game by using its high rate of fire of 3,000 to 4,000 rounds per minute to drive back the enemy hidden in the dense jungle.
It would put out such an amazing volume of fire that ground troops firing AK-47s and even small machine guns would just be wiped out by it.
If there was a firefight and a helicopter came in with miniguns, there was pretty much nowhere you could hide.
The minigun also unleashed a barrage of psychological warfare against the Viet Cong.
They feared the minigun. The minigun, when it's fired, it doesn't even sound like a gun. It sounds like a chainsaw. It has a massive flame that comes out of the end of the barrels. So the psychological effect had a huge impact on the Vietnamese.
If you want to know what whoop-ass comes in, this is the can right here.
The six-barrel design is crucial because of the minigun's high rate of fire.
If all 3,000 to 4,000 rounds a minute were shot through one barrel, the barrel would melt. So that's why it has 6 independent barrels. It also has a DC motor that runs the gears. The motor runs at a high rate of speed. That's how we get 3,000 to 4,000 rounds a minute out of the minigun.
Dan Fessler puts his Marine Corps training to work and takes the minigun for a test drive. Unfortunately, the original weapons produced by General Electric had problems with jamming.
But the newer units being produced by Dillon Aero down in Arizona have eliminated the vast majority of those problems, and today it's considered a very reliable first-class weapon.
Today, the M134D is used by the U.S. and British Navies and Special Ops teams to protect ships at sea.
This weapon is the fastest weapon available, and it is awesome.
It is a dominating weapon. It shows up on the battlefield, people are going to leave because you're going to win.
True machine guns use a belt to feed bullets, and the high rate of fire often requires a system for cooling the barrel. Number 4 on our list of top 10 machine guns was a hard-hitting and reliable weapon for the British Army in World War I, the Vickers machine gun. Introduced in 1911, the Vickers fires the .303 British round. It has an effective range of up to 800 yards and can fire 450 to 600 rounds per minute. World War I. The increased killing power of the machine gun was a game changer by forcing armies to dig trenches and hold their positions or face certain death on the open battlefield.
When machine guns were first developed, there was a different concept behind them. The concept behind the machine gun was basically that as the same as artillery. It was made to support troops. And the Vickers was designed around the idea that it was to support the troops. In a fixed emplacement, it could fire for long periods at long ranges.
The Vickers took its basic design from the success of an earlier weapon, the Maxim machine gun.
The major improvement that the Vickers made over the Maxim is that the bolt itself now unlocks up instead of down. And by doing so, it allows a large portion of the receiver that would be on the Maxim to be removed. And that in itself saves a large portion of weight.
Despite its lighter weight, the Vickers was a bulky battlefield weapon, difficult to transport, and typically operated by a team of 6 men. In order to continually fire thousands of rounds, a water jacket was needed to wrap around the barrel to keep it from melting.
You unscrew this, we pour the water in. Out here is your drain. This is where it would drain out when you need to.
If soldiers ran out of water for the jacket, they often turned to a unique but unpleasant solution.
You could actually urinate into the jacket to help the barrel stay cool. The drawback was that uric acid, when it heated up, one, it stinks really badly, and two, the uric acid eats at the brass fittings and will create problems later on. But in the heat of battle, you got to do what you got to do.
A key component to the Vickers' success was its mount, which provided a stable platform that improved its accuracy.
Accuracy of the Vickers was absolutely outstanding. You can hit a man-sized target at about 2,000 meters, and that just can't be matched by today's modern machine guns.
A major improvement Vickers made over the Maxim was its muzzle booster, a device used to harness the energy of the bullet as it exits the barrel.
The reason boosters are important is because when you get in muddy or cold or wet or there's some kind of malfunction, something is going wrong in the gun, that booster really helps out to make the action more reliable.
Vickers also added a dual claw system to the feed block of the gun to prevent it from jamming.
When the belt is pulled in to the weapon, if it has a single claw, it allows the round to flop back and forth. And what that does is, if the round can flop back and forth with the belt, it can be pulled in at an angle and cause the weapon to jam. What these dual claws here and the dual claws on the bottom provide is a stable, secure hold on the round so that one can't rock back and forth and two can't fall back out of the gun.
In spite of the many improvements of the Vickers, British soldiers were forced to deal with a major imperfection when firing the gun.
One of the design flaws with the Vickers is that every time a round was fired, this handle would kick back. So the British were taught to hold their index fingers high on the handle. That way it keeps the knuckles out of the way of the toggle. If it strikes your hand, it could cause some pretty severe damage.
The Vickers became one of the longest used weapons in the modern era. Its service life ran through World War II, the Korean War, and was eventually declared obsolete by the British Army in the late 1960s.
The Vickers machine gun really changed the way the British fought in that it gave them a weapon that was lighter and more portable than the previous Maxim. There was not much that could really stop that gun.
At number 3, a gun that gave the German war machine the edge in World War II, the MG42. The reliable and durable MG42 used a 7.92 by 57 millimeter cartridge, also known as the 8mm Mauser, and could shoot 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute. It had an effective range of 1,094 yards.
What the MG42 provided for the Germans was a great. a great machine gun at a really critical point in their history. The Vickers machine gun really changed the way the British fought in that it gave them a weapon that was lighter and more portable than the previous Maxim. There was not much that could really stop that gun.
At number 2, a gun that gave the German war machine the edge in World War II, the MG42. The reliable and durable MG42 used a 7.92 by 57 millimeter cartridge, also known as the 8mm Mauser, and could shoot 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute. It had an effective range of 1,094 yards. By 1942, the German army was fighting a two-front war and needed a weapon that could be produced faster and cheaper than its current machine gun, the MG-34.
It was much more producible. It fired better. It was equipped so that you could have interchangeable parts in it.
Production costs were kept down and manufacturing time cut in half by utilizing stamping technology.
This was formed with large dies that came down and took sheet metal and actually formed these pieces, and then they were welded together.
During World War II, over 400,000 units were produced. The German war machine found several uses for the weapon.
You'd find it on bombers, Stukas. They would be on patrol boats. These would be on top of tanks to help protect them from charging infantry, particularly on the Russian front.
The MG-42's reputation as a devastating killing machine spread throughout the Allied ranks.
This was the most fearsome weapon ever deployed during World War II. The Russians just were terrified of it, and our troops were terrified of it as well.
Allied soldiers dubbed the MG-42 Hitler's buzzsaw because of its horrifying sound.
When you hear that thing rip, you do not want to be on the business end of that weapon.
The MG-42's high rate of fire caused the barrel to heat up and risk melting. A quick change barrel allowed soldiers to stay in the fight.
The barrel was removed. A new barrel was grabbed to replace that, put in place, and the soldier was now back in the fight.
For stability and accuracy, the MG-42 operated from a specially designed mount.
What it does is that it goes and helps suppress a lot of the vibration and a lot of the rocking motion, and this tends to make this gun extremely accurate.
That mount played a key role for the Germans in World War II, a role that nearly changed the outcome of D-Day.
Dozens of these mounts were emplaced in the cliffs and bluffs over Omaha Beach and were sited to actually go after particular sectors of the beach. And that way, they could just massacre people coming across the tide line onto the beach and kill them all before they got to the bluffs and could begin working up into the second and third lines of defense. And this way, they hoped to stop the first and second and third waves of the invasion and make the invasion flounder. And at Omaha Beach, they very nearly succeeded.
In spite of the power of the MG-42, Allied forces prevailed in Normandy, and the march to defeat Hitler began. Ironically, the major downside to the MG-42 was the one thing Allied forces feared most: its high rate of fire.
It tended to fire off a lot of ammunition at a time when the German munitions industry was nowhere near as productive or as efficient as the Allied one. And you had to go ahead and lug vast amounts of ammunition with you. So if you were in a squad that had an MG-42, everybody was probably going to be carrying a belt, and as they went into battle, they would drop their belt next to the gunner, and he would then be responsible for going and hopefully rationing it through the coming fight.
But the MG-42 also set the standard for the modern machine gun.
It's a dominating, absolutely terrifying piece of hardware, and I really believe this was one of the outstanding machine guns of all time.
The machine gun, like its cousin the rifle, share a high ratio of barrel length to caliber of bullet. In effect, a machine gun is really a fully automatic rifle. We're counting down the top 10 machine guns that are game changers on the battlefield. Our number 2 machine gun was developed in 1884 and is the granddaddy of them all, the Maxim machine gun. We tested the 1910 Russian Maxim, which uses a 7.62 by 54 millimeter round. It has a rate of fire of 600 rounds per minute and an effective range of 1,100 yards.
The appearance of the Maxim machine gun on the battlefield changed it forever. You really look at modern warfare before the coming of the Maxim machine gun and after.
In 1884, American-born inventor Hiram Maxim revolutionized the battlefield with the first fully automatic weapon in the world.
Our reality of the great weapon of today is a intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear weapon on top of it. In the 1880s, it was the Maxim machine gun.
Maxim used the energy of the bullet's recoil force to eject the used cartridge and insert the next bullet. This revolutionary design is what made it fully automatic. In the 1880s, the British used the Maxim with devastating results in colonial warfare.
It was first employed in the Zulu Wars in South Africa. And there was a specific incident where 50 British soldiers and 4 Maxims held off 5,000 Zulus for a long time, and it was specifically attributed to this Maxim.
But this wasn't enough to convince British military leaders to fully adopt the Maxim. They distrusted machine guns because of their reputation to jam in the heat of battle. The German army saw things differently and struck a licensing deal with Maxim to make their own version, the MG-08. In World War I, the British and French suffered heavy casualties as a result.
They started literally losing thousands and tens of thousands of people a day. And so the British and the French really looked at what the Germans were doing and how many machine guns they had produced and how they were employing them, and started redesigning their own ideas in machine gunnery to try and match the Germans.
The Maxim was produced largely using milling technology. In this process, the gun's pieces are individually made rather than stamped from sheet metal. This made for a tough, reliable, and robust gun. The 1910 Russian Maxim is a slightly modified version.
The 1910 Maxim incorporated a water jacket. The earlier gun that they first designed did not have the water jacket, and they found that the barrel overheated very quickly.
A significant improvement of the water jacket was made in the event of fighting in cold weather.
They found in cold weather, the water would freeze, and they couldn't cool the gun. So they made this version, which was called the snow cap, where they could take snow and plug down into there chunks of ice.
But at roughly 60 pounds, the Maxim was bulky and heavy, taking a team of up to 6 men to operate the gun and carry ammunition.
And the more people you start putting into one gun, the more you take away from other areas that may need troops.
Because the Maxim was the first fully automatic weapon, it redefined modern warfare.
The 500-mile-long trench line from the Atlantic coast to the Swiss border in World War I is really not a choice. It's an inevitable result of the Maxim taking over the battlefield.
Before we hit number 1, let's recap the top machine guns. At number 10, the Soviet-made SG-43, a game changer for the Soviets in World War II.
It was reliable, and it stayed in service for many decades.
At number 9, the American-made M249 SAW, the perfect choice for close combat situations.
It'll put out a very impressive volume of fire.
At number 8, the Mark 19 grenade launcher.
You can just do multiple rounds in a whole area. You can do a lot of devastation.
At number 7, the M60, a battle-hardened weapon with widespread use.
The lightweight of the M60 made it one of the greatest guns of its time.
At number 6, the Soviet-built PKM.
The PKM is a tough, rugged, reliable gun.
At number 5, a gun that unleashes a reign of terror, the M134 minigun.
This gun is the monster of the battlefield, and anytime it shows up, it's just going to devastate an enemy.
At number 4, the Vickers machine gun.
You can hit a man-sized target at about 2,000 meters, and that just can't be matched by today's modern machine guns.
At number 3, a gun known as Hitler's buzzsaw, the MG42.
It's a dominating, absolutely terrifying piece of hardware.
At number 2, the first fully automatic machine gun, the Maxim.
When they first started using it, they just didn't understand how devastating the weapon was.
We've saved the best and baddest for last. At number 1, a machine gun that separates the men from the boys, the Browning M2. The M2 shoots a 50 caliber cartridge at a rate of 450 to 575 rounds per minute. It has a maximum range of an astounding 4.5 miles. During World War I, the machine gun proved its worth on the battlefield. In 1918, General Blackjack Pershing turned to famed gunmaker John Browning to create a more universal weapon.
The idea here was not just to go ahead and create another machine gun to be used against personnel, but actually a weapon which could destroy things, trucks, aircraft, emplacements.
In 1918, Browning started testing several 50 caliber prototypes. Finally, in 1933, the Browning machine gun, or M2, was introduced. U.S. troops nicknamed the new gun Ma Deuce. A major design change that improved the weapon was making it air-cooled.
It allowed that weapon to become much more adaptable. They could put it in the wing of an aircraft, they could put it on top of a tank, they could put it in a Jeep, they could put it all these other places that they couldn't before.
With that kind of versatility, the M2 became the basic weapon for the United States in a number of areas of conflict. During World War II, fighter planes typically carried 6 or 8 of them. B-17 and B-24 bombers were equipped with a dozen or more.
What the Americans did is they put a lot of 50 calibers in the airplanes, and that would put out a very large wall of lead that any airplane ran into would just get torn apart.
We're at the Mustang Gun Range just outside Reno, Nevada, with gun manufacturer Curtis DeBoard.
This is the standard M3 tripod. This is the traversing and elevating mechanism. So you can zero in on a target. You can move this up and down. You can loosen this and slide the gun from side to side and lock the gun in to give you direct fire right onto a target, and it's quite accurate.
But it's the size of the 50 caliber round that is so deadly.
This is the 30-06 round that was used in World War I and World War II. This is the 50 caliber round. Considerable size difference.
The M2 is capable of using armor-piercing incendiary rounds, which destroy light armored vehicles by igniting their fuel tanks. But the M2 is bulky, and the sheer size and weight are significant factors when employing the gun.
It is a heavy gun, and it has to be mounted either on a fixed hard vehicle or on a tripod.
M2 can be belt-fed from either side of the gun, ideal in a situation where 2 guns are mounted side by side. The brass is ejected out of the bottom, so there's no interference with the other gun. It's this kind of versatility that ranks high with the armed forces.
If you were to talk to a sergeant in any Army or Marine Corps around the world and say, what piece of equipment would you covet more than any other to help you and your men survive? I think they would look at you and they would say, give me a 50 caliber machine gun.
Its reliability and potent use of force make the M2 our #1 machine gun.
We're still building them today. And not just building a few, but it's still the heavy machine gun of the world. And there's nothing that can compare to that.
In the history of automatic weapons, I don't think there's a finer machine gun. La Deuce rocks.
On the open battlefield, in a crowded urban combat zone, or a thick jungle hotspot, the machine gun has played a unique role in the history of warfare. It has forced armies to change the way they fight. And it has revolutionized the infantry. It has been the ultimate game changer on battlefields around the world.